Today's lesson is the odd and unexpected consequences of climate change. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And once again, we're going to be talking about climate change. This is a popular topic because it does seem to be affecting us more and more as time goes on. We may not feel it so much now because it's November. It's getting cooler and we're getting ready for winter. But during the summer, it does feel very hot. And, of course, climate change is affecting us in other ways besides temperature. It's affecting all other things like mosquitoes and turbulence, which we'll get into today.
Absolutely, yes. Of course, we've been having warmer and warmer summers here in Taiwan. I believe 2024, last time I checked, was on track to be the hottest summer since they've been recording temperature and weather data in Taiwan. And of course, yeah, we've seen some other things. But apart from the weather, which of course is the obvious thing to look at being affected by climate change, there's all sorts of things from the way mosquitoes are spread around the world to even the size of goats in certain parts of our planet. So let's get into the article and find out some of these interesting, surprising, and often worrying effects of climate change. The odd and unexpected consequences of climate change. Beyond the headlines about extreme weather, climate change is influencing our world in some strange and surprising ways, from shrinking goats to worsening allergies. Let's explore some of these lesser-known but also important consequences of climate change.
大家好，标题中介绍名词 consequence， 意思是影响、结果或是后果。例如 Skipping class can have serious consequences, such as falling behind in your studies. 翘课可能会有严重的后果，像是学业落后。或者 The consequence of missing the deadline was a penalty fee. 错过截止日期的后果是罚款。下一个看到名词 allergy， 表示过敏反应或是过敏症。例如 Lauren has to be careful about what she orders at restaurants because of her nut allergy. 由于对坚果过敏 Lauren 在餐厅点餐时必须非常小心。或是 Scientists try to figure out why food allergies are becoming more common. 科学家们试图弄清楚为什么食物过敏变得越来越普遍。
Okay, the first part of our lesson here is just an introductory paragraph. It begins by saying, beyond the headlines about extreme weather, climate change is influencing our world in some strange and surprising ways. From shrinking goats to worsening allergies. So we're talking about beyond the headlines, which means in addition to the news that we normally hear about extreme weather and wildfires and stuff like that, we also can talk about how climate change is influencing our world in different ways, in strange and unusual, surprising ways. And we've got a range of ways in which climate change is affecting us, from shrinking goats to worsening allergies. Okay, I would be very concerned about the second one. I think a lot of people are allergic to things and we don't want their allergies to get worse. But I'm not sure if smaller goats is such a big problem.
Well, yes, it doesn't probably seem to be a huge problem unless you're farming the goats for their meat, in which case you'd have less money. But it is certainly surprising that it's happened so quickly that we've noticed a change in the size of goats. So as we wrap up the introduction, it says, let's explore some of these lesser known but also important consequences of climate change. Yeah, I think a lot of us know that changing weather patterns and the increasing severity and strength of storms, these are the more well-known consequences of climate change. If something is lesser known, that just means people know about it a little bit less. It's a little bit more of a niche or a specific type of idea. Maybe if you're interested in goat sizes, you would know about the shrinking goats. But for a lot of us, if we haven't read articles like this or seen programs and stories on the news, we might not know about these so much. So that's why it's accurate to describe them as lesser known, but all of these, from the well-known to the lesser known, are important consequences of climate change. We saw that word consequence in our title. A consequence, of course, is just the result of an action. When you do something, what happens? That is a consequence, and often consequences are perceived as being a little bit negative, right? So the consequence of smoking for 20 years might be lung disease as you grow older or something like that. It's just the result of an action. And so let's look at some of the consequences of climate change, starting with mosquitoes on the move in the second part of our article. Mosquitoes on the move. Mosquito-borne diseases such as dengue fever and malaria are on the rise. The insects have benefited from increased temperatures and humidity levels, which have allowed them to spread to areas where they previously struggled to survive. For example, the tiger mosquito is now thriving in 13 European countries, from Spain in the south to Germany in the north, bringing substantially increased rates of dengue with it.
第二部分看到名词 humidity， 它的意思是湿度或是潮湿。例如 The high humidity levels made the air feel thick and sticky. 湿度高使空气感觉又湿又黏。也可以说 Taiwan's heat and humidity cause many people to feel uncomfortable during the summer. 台湾的炎热及潮湿让许多人在夏天感到不适。再来介绍动词 thrive， 表示茁壮成长或是兴旺。我们可以说 The plants thrive in the warm, humid climate of the rainforest. 这些植物在热带雨林温暖、潮湿的气候中茁壮生长。又或者说 With enough sun and water, the roses Edgar planted soon thrived. 有充足的阳光和水分 Edgar 种的玫瑰很快就茁壮成长。继续看到副词 substantially， 指在很大程度上、本质上或是大体上。例如The restaurant's profits have increased substantially thanks to its new menu items. 由于新的菜单品项，那间餐厅的获利大幅增加。又或者说 The new advertising strategy has substantially increased our store's sales. 新的广告策略大大增加了我们商店的销售额。
Okay, the second part of our article is entitled Mosquitoes on the Move. If you're on the move, of course, you are moving, you are going about your business. And in this particular case, we're talking about mosquitoes moving more and more around the world. They may be in definite parts of the world, in specific parts of the world, at least they were in the past, but because of climate change, maybe they're flying farther afield and affecting more people with basically different kinds of diseases, like we're going to talk about right now. It says mosquito-borne diseases such as dengue fever and malaria are on the rise. First of all, these are mosquito-borne diseases. Here, born does not refer to something being born, starting its life by being born from its mother. In this particular case, it just means these are diseases that are transmitted or spread by mosquitoes, and they're on the move, they're on the rise, which means they're getting more and more common. We got some diseases such as dengue fever and malaria. Dengue fever, of course, is 登革热 in Chinese, and malaria is 疟疾. But in any case, they are on the rise. They are spreading farther and farther around the world.
Exactly right. They're traditionally thought of as tropical diseases, diseases you might get when you go to that warm area of the world around the equator. But some of these diseases are spreading to the north and to the south into areas and infecting people who would never have expected to come into contact with dengue fever, malaria. I remember West Nile virus was spreading around New York State a few summers ago, and of course being named after a river in Africa, and then finding this mosquito-borne disease in a colder part of the world like the northeast of America and New York was quite surprising. And it says the insects, that's mosquitoes of course, have benefited from increased temperatures and humidity levels, which have allowed them to spread to areas where they previously struggled to survive. This is kind of a complement to articles we see that people in colder parts of the world are now buying air conditioners because the summers are getting longer and hotter and wetter and things like that. And that's, of course, what we're talking about with increased temperatures, hotter temperatures, higher temperatures, and humidity levels. Yeah, humidity is that moisture in the air. When you go out and the air feels very thick and heavy and kind of wet in the summertime, it may not be raining. There may just be a few clouds in the sky, but the air is carrying a lot of moisture vapor in it. So we often measure humidity levels in a percentage, right? If it's above kind of 65%, you might notice that the air feels a little thick. When you sweat, the sweat doesn't evaporate off your body as easily because the air has quite a lot of water in it already, and mosquitoes love that kind of weather. Of course, the kind of weather we associate with the tropics. And this has allowed, or these high humidity levels and temperatures which have allowed them to spread to areas where they previously struggled to survive. Places like up in the northern parts of America, getting into the southern parts of Europe as well. For example, the tiger mosquito is now thriving in 13 European countries, from Spain in the south to Germany in the north, bringing substantially increased rates of dengue with it. So here's just one example. There are several types of mosquitoes. The tiger mosquito is one of them. And it's just surprising to find it thriving in 13 different European countries. When something thrives, it is doing very well in its environment. If you take a plant and you put it in some dirt and you water it and it just seems to grow a little bit every day, almost like you can see it growing, you could say it's thriving. It's doing very, very well. People can also thrive. Maybe if your friend moves to another country and they find a great job and they're really happy, great group of friends, and they're just doing really well in life, you'd say that they are thriving. And when, of course, animals or creatures or plants do that in nature, it means they found a very happy and healthy environment, and of course their numbers will expand and grow as their populations increase. So 13 countries now see the tiger mosquito, from Spain in the south, not too surprising, of course, since southern Spain is just a few kilometers from Africa. So that's in the south, where you'd expect it to be warm, to Germany in the north. Okay, it may be southern Germany, but clearly these mosquitoes have gone around or across the Alps in Switzerland, so they've covered some of the colder areas of Europe and certainly found themselves a new home in Germany, where again, 20, 30 years ago, it may have been almost impossible to find a tiger mosquito. And so these mosquitoes are bringing substantially increased rates of dengue with it, or with them. Substantially means quite a lot, more than a small amount. All right, if something substantially increases, it increases in a way you would notice. It increases in a way that is something worth assessing, not just something you can say, oh, that's a small amount, that's just a minor change. No, this is more of a major change, a major increase in the number of these mosquitoes. Worrying stuff.
Exactly. And of course, substantial is the adjective, substantial. So we're making this into an adverb by adding ly, substantially, to a great extent. And yes, indeed, we have higher rates of dengue fever in those countries in Europe. So I suppose most Europeans are thinking about immigrating north to Denmark or Norway or Sweden, but it will probably be a waste of time because climate change will get worse and the mosquitoes will fly up there eventually, and probably they'll end up at the North Pole. Who knows? Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the third part and talk about turbulence in the skies.
Trouble in the skies. Turbulence, an already common air travel issue, is becoming an increasing concern due to warming temperatures brought on by climate change. Data shows a significant global rise in serious turbulence in the past few decades, including higher levels of unpredictable and hard-to-detect clear air turbulence. This not only poses safety risks to passengers and crew members, but also contributes to growing maintenance costs for airlines. Better turbulence prediction and detection systems will be key to addressing the challenges and costs associated with this climate-driven phenomenon.
第三部分介绍名词 maintenance， 指的是维修、保养，也可以是维持或是保持的意思。举例来说， Regular maintenance of your car will help prevent the need for costly repairs. 定期保养你的车子将有助于避免昂贵的维修。又或者说， Vintage cars look great, but they require a lot of maintenance. 古董车看起来很棒，但它们需要大量的维护。再来看到名词 prediction， 表示预测、预计或是预言。例如， The weather predictions for tomorrow include heavy rain and strong winds. 明天的天气预报包括会有大雨和强风。也可以说， My prediction is that Steve will run out of money soon if he doesn't start cutting down on his spending. 我的预测是，如果 Steve 不开始削减开支，他很快就会耗尽资金。最后看到名词 detection， 表示侦测或是探测。我们可以说， A spy has to learn how to get information while avoiding detection. 一名间谍必须学习如何在避免被发现的同时，同步获取资讯。最后一个例子， Early detection of the disease allowed the man to get medicine in time to save his life. 早期发觉疾病，使得那名男子及时得到药物治疗，以保住一命。
Okay, so the title of the third and final part of today's lesson is Trouble in the Skies. And in this particular case, we're talking about flying. We have lots of trouble in the skies sometimes if there are hijackers or whatever, or if there's a plane crash. That is an example of trouble in the skies. But we're talking about something called turbulence here, and that just means the air up in the upper atmosphere there is blowing kind of hard, and the planes cannot really predict where it's blowing. So if you ever have ridden in an airplane, sometimes the plane kind of bounces up and down. It's kind of scary the first time you experience it. You might think the plane is going to crash or something, but no, it's normal. Turbulence happens all the time, but I guess it's happening more and more because of climate change.
Yeah, of course. We've seen a lot of these stories in the news. I remember back in May, there was the Singapore Airlines flight that had a lot of people get hurt, possibly even a fatality on the plane. And
oh, no.
Air Europa in July also had to divert a plane to Brazil because they were experiencing a lot of turbulence, people getting tossed around in the plane, injuring themselves when they smash into the ceiling and damage things. So a very scary situation. That's why they always say sitting in an airplane, even if you're just reading a book or taking a nap, as long as you're not standing up, going to the bathroom, walking around, put your seatbelt on, because this turbulence can strike at any time out of the blue, and it can be rather violent and dramatic. It says data, that's information collected by airlines. Data shows a significant global rise in serious turbulence in the past few decades, including higher levels of unpredictable and hard-to-detect clear air turbulence. So yeah, it's just kind of like the mosquitoes. It's just getting worse and worse, and we're noticing it more and more in the past few decades. Of course, this was over a 10, 20, 30-year period of time. They've seen higher levels of unpredictable, so more of this turbulence. It's unpredictable. And this is interesting. It's hard to detect clear air turbulence. I think before, if you're flying through a storm, you'd kind of expect the plane to get kind of shaken around, pushed up and down, side to side, because, of course, the winds in the storm cell and whatnot. If you're flying near a tornado or a typhoon area, that kind of thing. Not too surprising, but blue skies, nothing seems to be wrong, no strange weather, and all of a sudden, the plane starts shaking around and things go flying around inside the plane out of the blue with no warning at all. It says this not only poses safety risks to passengers and crew members, but also contributes to growing maintenance costs for airlines. That's a good point. So obviously, and when it hits the news, we always notice and talk about and hear about these risks to passengers and crew members. When something poses a risk to someone or something, it is a possible or potential danger. That's basically all we're saying. To pose is to sort of be or act as or stand as a risk or a danger or something that you would like to avoid, some trouble you want to avoid. But passengers and crew members, of course, being people in the planes, the crew members, I guess, are more at risk because they're usually walking around serving the passengers and whatnot. But also, it contributes to growing maintenance costs for airlines. The planes can get damaged. I believe when that Singapore Airlines plane was affected by turbulence, the panels on the ceiling came down, and of course, the drink carts went flying around. A lot of damage inside the plane, and you might imagine there might be structural damage to the outside of the plane. They might have to look for cracks in the wings and other areas like that. So that's maintenance costs. Maintenance is basically the work and the cost, the expense that you might pay, and the work you have to do to maintain something. To maintain is to keep it in good working condition, keep it in good working order. So fixing things, repairing things, making sure that problems don't become serious before they're caught and addressed and fixed. So basically, the airlines are losing money on this. Passengers are nervous about flying. Ticket sales could go down, all because of this turbulence.
Right. So again, we're talking about this unpredictable and hard to detect turbulence. It poses risks to passengers. You could say it poses danger or poses a danger to passengers. And of course, maintenance gets more expensive. You want to maintain your car as well. If you're driving a car, you need to have regular maintenance. You need to check the air in the tires. You need to change the oil, etc., etc. Those are all parts of automobile maintenance. And let's go on to the next sentence. It says, better turbulence prediction and detection systems will be key, will be vital, will be important to addressing the challenges and costs associated with this climate-driven phenomenon. So that's what we need to do about this unpredictable turbulence. We need to have better prediction. If you predict something, you basically guess what's going to happen in the future. Of course, fortune tellers try to predict the future to tell us what's going to happen to us turbulence in the new year or whatever. So we need to have better prediction, and we also need to have better detection systems, maybe better radar on the planes or whatever to know that wild air is coming, and we should all take preparations or make preparations for when it comes. And yes, indeed, this turbulence is a climate-driven phenomenon, which means it is something that is happening as a result of climate change. So the next time you go flying in the skies, when you fly the friendly skies, remember that you might experience some turbulence. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today, but we're going to turn things over now to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分提到，蚊子传播的疾病不断增加，这些昆虫受惠于气温和湿度上升，使它们能够传播到以前难以生存的地区。文中用到 areas where they previously struggled to survive 来表达以前难以生存的地区。那么 where 在这边是当关系副词，我们来整理一下相关用法。 where 当关系副词相当于介系词加上 which， 像是 at which、in which 等等，那可以用来引导关系子句去修饰或补述说明跟地点有关的先行词。好，首先第一个用法是当先行词是非特定不明确的地点时，我们要用限定用法，要去限定它的范围嘛。那么 where 的前面不加逗号，这时候关系子句去限定先行词的范围就紧接在后面，所以中间不接逗号哦。好，那就像课文里面先行词 areas， 它是不明确的地点，我们不知道它是指什么地区，所以后面就紧接着关系子句 where they previously struggled to survive， 去限定它的范围，表达是蚊子以前难以生存的地区。好，那第二个用法就是当先行词它是明确特定的地点时，那就不用限定它的范围啦。这时候关系子句的功能是要对先行词做补充说明，所以要记得用逗号把这个补充说明的部分跟主要子句隔开来，那这样就是属于非限定用法。例如 Ray spent his summer vacation in Tainan where his grandparents live。 Ray 在台南度过暑假，那是他爷爷奶奶住的地方。台南是明确的地点，那么 where his grandparents live 是用来补充说明台南是他爷爷奶奶住的地方，所以 where 的前面要加逗号，就是把这个补充部分隔开来。好，课文第三部分提到说，由于气候变迁造成气温升高，乱流成为越来越受关注的问题了。那文中用到 due to 来表达因为由于的语义，它的意思其实就跟 because of 还有 owing to 差不多，那后面要接名词或动名词去说明原因。这边要注意几个重点。第一个 due to 和 owing to 是比较正式的用法，比较常会用在正式的公告里面，可能像是政府宣布的消息啊，航空公司宣布因为某些缘故而取消班机、延误班机等等。那么 because of 在口语当中则是比较常用的。第二个重点是 due to 和 because of 可以接在 be 动词之后来当补语用，那么 owing to 则不行。例如 The delay was due to heavy fog， 延误是因为起浓雾。第三个重点是，如果要在 due to 后面接子句，我们必须先加上同位语，像是 the fact， 写作 due to the fact that 主词加动词，这时候其实就会跟 because 接子句，意思就差不多啦。好，那么以上今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Consequence. After cheating on the test, the students had to face the consequences of their actions. Allergy. George's doctor advised him to get tested for food allergies. Humidity. I find it hard to breathe in places with really high humidity. Thrive. With good care and attention, your garden will thrive. Substantially. The cost of living has risen substantially over the last decade. Maintenance. Proper maintenance of a car can prevent the need for costly repairs. Prediction. Scientists are working on improving prediction models for natural disasters. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.